Right, there we are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Quinn Jacobson, and welcome to the Studio Q Show. I hope you all know me by now. I think you do, or for most of you that do. We're going to talk about the wet plate collodion process and a lot of the variants in there today. And we're also going to get some review or feedback on some photographs from a person that's put in a couple of images to look at. Hello, Jan from Norway. Good to see you. And we're also going to talk a little bit about gelatin and dichromates, which is a great segue to non-silver printing or using gelatin and ink, pigment print kind of thing going on. So hello, Will from Erie. Hello, hello. Good to see you, Tom. Good morning, everybody. Good. I'm glad people are coming in here. I know we're a tad bit early. We got a few watching on YouTube and a couple in the StreamYard. I can have 6 people in here. So if you guys want to jump in StreamYard, or I hope our presenter shows up here. I hope he does. We'll see what happens. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Let everybody catch up if they haven't. If they're not here, they'll catch up with us shortly. So let's do this. Let's see, application window. I got to keep track, so I do my little slideshow here so I don't get off course. Obviously, I'm busy again today as ever. It's the house is set, everything's going on. I got to get over there this morning and put some insulation around in the crawl space and do some other fun stuff. So my wife and I are just kind of hanging out and doing that in between. We've already been over this morning, but a little chilly this morning, but the sun is out. It'll warm up. We'll probably get 10 degrees today, Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll be a beautiful day here. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. We're going to do a technical Q&A. I have a couple of questions that came in that I think are relevant, not only to today's topic on pigment printing and dichromates, but also just in general on some negative questions. So this is, and I wrote Simon. I don't know Simon, but only from email here. But I wrote Simon and told him how to resolve these problems. But I wanted to share his email with you today and kind of go over what he's asking, how it kind of needs to be rephrased, and some of the things you can do as far as preparing a negative. And this is interesting because both of these are in reference to pigment prints. Simon wants to know what kind of density he needs to do oil on glass, which it doesn't matter what substrate you use, paper or glass, it doesn't matter. And Michelle in Canada wants to know why his gelatin is puddling up on his paper and cracking when it's dry. And I'm actually going to address Michelle's later as we go through the little slideshow and talk about dichromates and gelatin. But Simon says, what is the least I need to do to give myself the best chance of obtaining a suitable negative? And again, the context of this is oil printing, okay? So just so you know, and this is a wet collodion negative. He's asking what kind of density he needs to do oil printing. Should I at minimum request a different negative collodion from my supplier? Yes, obviously that would help. And I say this often, you can make negatives, wet collodion negatives, with positive chemistry. It's just you're going to have a little better chance at getting really good negatives with a slight adjustment in the chemistry, basically the collodion and the developer. And the time of the developer is on the plate versus a positive, positives are 15 seconds more or less to bring the image in, highlights, midtones, and shadows. And negatives go from 30, 45 seconds to a couple of minutes. And that's all based in chemistry. The negative collodion he's referring to is the higher ammonium iodide collodion for more contrast. It turns red faster, that kind of stuff. We talked about that last time. And then he says, prepare a developer per negative developer in your book. Yes, so if you, Simon, if you want to make a suitable negative for any pop printing out process, a suitable wet collodion negative, you can't mix and match the negative developer with the positive collodion, so to speak. You're not going to get the results you want. So you need about half as much iron in your developer, about 3 times as much acid, and then the correct exposure and obviously the ammonium iodide and the collodion will help you achieve that. So if you're going to do negatives, do the chemistry on negatives, switch over. If you're going to try to obtain a negative with a positive chemistry, you can do that, especially for oil printing and colloidal chloride. They will do quite well with thinner negatives, whereas albumin or salt or some of these other printing out processes really require that density. So if you do use your positive collodion, what you want to do is you want to make a bright ambrotype. And in my book, Chemical Pictures, I give a recipe for pyrogalic acid redeveloper. You can't get pyro in New Zealand, pyrogalic acid. Replace that with ferrous sulfate, the regular developer iron. And that it won't be it doesn't stain like pyro, and it won't be as effective, but it will be effective enough to build your density without losing density. So when I talk about, and Simon asked this here, when I talk about negatives losing density, that's in camera. When you overexpose the actual plate, when you pull the cap, open the shutter, when you overexpose a negative, you start to lose density. It flattens out. Now, overdevelopment is a different scenario. And redevelopment, you're not going to do anything to the negative. If the silver is there, it will stain or redevelop. If it's not, it won't. So if you have a slightly overexposed or overdeveloped negative and you go to pour your redeveloper on it, you're going to intensify or redevelop all the silver on there, even the unexposed stuff. If you have veiling or fogging, it will not work. How do you know when you have enough density? Is basically when you run your print, you make a paper, dichromate it, expose it, wash it, swell it, and ink it. And until then, you really, if you don't have experience, you really have to kind of trial and error, experiment with this. The other part of the oil printing, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, is the inking process. If you're not good at inking or you're new at this stuff, you're going to have a more difficult time with a thinner negative than a more dense negative for oil print. Give yourself a much better chance of making a good oil print, Rollins oil print, when you can really swell that and have the relief really extreme, and that means a really good contrasting negative. So is the point readily visible on the developing plate, or is it simply managed by trial and error? Kind of both, but mostly experiment, get to know what works, what prints for you well, your style of inking the print, and all those kinds of things. And I appreciate you watching the show. If that doesn't, along with my email, if that doesn't answer your question, shoot me another email and we'll tackle it again. And then I said, Michelle in Canada, he wants to know why he's using Hanamiel paper. He slots it off and pours his gelatin on, and then he wants to know why it puddles up. I'll show you what that means here in just a minute. So let's talk about back here and make sure we don't have anything crazy going on here. Okay. Hello, Sasha. Good to see you. Good to see you. And Dale's in here too. Awesome. Hola todos. Hello, everybody. Hello, Pablo, amigo. Good to see you too. When you're saying positive collodion, you mean positive or negative or negative developer? No, just stay with Dale. I mean, if you're going to use positive collodion, use positive developer. Don't try to switch those. If you can, if you're, oh, hold on. I got 2 horses coming up the road here. So, hold on just a second here. I got to let somebody know. Oh, I'm sorry, but I got to let somebody know. Sorry. There are 2 horses. Oops. on the street. Can't. Sorry, guys. I can't let them wander too far. I don't know where they went now, but anyway, sorry. Weird thing, right? Anyway, we don't want horses getting lost or they're wandering around up the road there. So you need to keep your chemistry. If you're making positive images and you're trying to make negatives, which I don't really advise, but if you want to do that, you can. Use all positive chemistry. If you're trying to make a negative, use the negative collodion and negative developer. That just makes sense, right? So hopefully that does it. Let's see. Wild horses. I don't think they're wild horses, Jeffrey. I think they're somebody's horses, and I don't know where they went now. I just saw them on the road here briefly, so I just texted my wife and asked her to call somebody. I wouldn't want my horses loose on a Saturday morning like that, and so we try to watch out for each other up here. It's a little more rugged. You know what I mean? A little more. You need a little more help up here. So let's talk about dichromates and gelatin or pigment prints. Now, a lot of people don't know what pigment prints are. And part of my kind of educational goals or desires is to give and help people with vernacular or words in these processes. So when a word's said, they know what it means and everybody's on the same page. So when we talk about pigment prints, we're talking about prints, and in this case, made with wet collodion negatives that only use gelatin and ink and dichromates, and we'll get to that. But the end result is a layer of gelatin and ink. There's no silver nitrate. There's none of that business of fixing, none of that, any of that stuff, right? So there's no silver gelatin in these prints. They're pigment prints, and typically they're oil prints and carbon prints. Those are two typical types of pigment prints. Jan asks, can you use a bright ambrotype to carbon print as well? That is a tricky question. The short answer is yes, you can. But the real answer is you're going to have to get your dichromates and acetone mixed at the right ratios to get the contrast that you want in the carbon print. It's a lot like inking the oil print. You have to get a technique down to do that because you're working with very tiny margins there, if you will. So the more dense your negative, the better it's going to be. But you can, Jan, you can do that. You should try one and show it to us. Let us know if it works for you. I've made pretty successful carbon prints with quite thin negatives. I mean, definitely not albumin or salt printing negatives. So that's what pigment prints are. My favorite printing out process is the Rollins oil printing, and especially on glass. And I know I've mentioned this several times before, but it's just a beautiful, I'm going to show you some examples here. It's just a beautiful process. It's unique substrate, and it has no silver gelatin in it. So the archival quality of pigment prints, oil prints, or carbon prints are incredibly, I don't know, let's say 10,000 years, you know. I mean, they're incredibly, the archival, the archivability of them far exceeds anything silver gelatin or anything with those kind of light sensitive materials in it. But let's talk about how these are made. You might find this interesting. First, we need to talk about your handling, your safety in handling these chemicals. The biggest thing for me is when people are messing around with dangerous chemicals and they don't really know what they're doing, it can cause a lot of problems. Dichromates are carcinogenic. They're dangerous, especially kind of like cadmium bromide when they're inhaled, lung cancer, but even getting it on your skin or those kinds of things, absorbing it into your body. Dichromates, chromium, very, very toxic, very deadly. If you guys, especially Americans, if you remember and she's still around, Erin Brockovich, her biggest thing was chromium, byproducts of chromium in the polluting the ground, right? The environmentally speaking, we're not big industrial factories that use that much dichromate or chromates in our materials. We just use a tiny bit of it. But what are they? It's an oxidizing agent, right? And it's a hexavalent chromium compounds. That means they're processed in a way which makes them dangerous, but it's very, very useful, especially for us as a light sensitive material in lieu of silver nitrate kind of thing. So you can see here, potassium dichromate is used as a chrome mordant in dyeing textiles. So it's also used to chrome tan leather and stain wood to an orange color. Potassium dichromate is used as an intensifier in black and white photographic processing. I thought that was kind of an interesting addition there. So we're not talking about pigment prints in this case, but we are talking about and describing light sensitive dichromates, and we'll get to that. So that is your silver nitrate in the pigment printing process. That's what gives you the ability to expose a negative on these on this material and produce a print from it. The second one, that basically it's not the substrate, but what we call the well, we could call it a carrier. We can call it you know, whatever we'd like, but you can do this on paper or glass, is gelatin. And what I do is I use an 8% mixture. That means 80 grams in a liter of gelatin. And I pour an 8% mixture on a piece of glass or paper that's it's liquid gelatin, right? So it's squared off. I got a little millimeter or two raised magnets on a strip on a piece of steel. I pour it on the glass or paper, let it sit for a minute, and then I cut the strips away, the gelatin, and I have this raised drying setup, but drying gelatin, and it will eventually dry flat, and that's what we want to do. So what is gelatin? It's the stuff you make Jell-O out of. It's the stuff that you use in pies and things like that if you do that kind of thing. A lot of vegans and a lot of people that don't use animal products don't like this stuff. I've had a lot of people ask me both in salt printing and this, is there a substitute for this? There is, but I haven't seen very good results from it. So, you know, if you're into that kind of thing, maybe this isn't a process for you, but it is produced by partial hydrolysis of collagen extracted from the skin and bones of and connective tissues of animals like cattle, chicken, pigs, and fish. Little bit gross, but, you know, I guess in a way. But basically what it is, I use the PhotoBloom 250, and what it is the gelatin will absorb water and swell up, and then it'll dry and flatten out. So I'm going to explain that to you here in just a second when we talk about how the application of the process and what happens with it. And I gave you the two examples of pigment prints, Rollins oil prints, and carbon printing, bromo oil. There's a lot of them out there. So let's talk about how this works. I think this is as fascinating or more fascinating than silver gelatin or even some of the other pop processes that we use with Wet Collodion. It's an interesting concept here, and we'll get to that in just a second. Absolutely, Jan, you're very welcome. Tom says, what about using ammonium dichro versus potassium dichro? Yes, you can. Those are basically interchangeable. You might want to use alcohol instead of acetone to do your dilutions and things like that. If you get in my book, you can read all the details of this stuff. We just don't have time to cover all of it this morning, but as you're watching this video, we don't have time to cover it in the hour that I'm here. So those are interchangeable, both dichromates. I happen to use potassium dichromate with acetone as the mixture that goes on to the paper or glass. Excellent. Hey, Doug, good morning, brother. Good to see you. Doug says, good morning, watching you chat while Oliver receives his chemo. Well, we wish Oliver the best. We really do. Everybody, I'm sure, is cheering on, and I hope he does well. And Jason says, pie, exactly, right? A Homer Simpson kind of thing. So the dichromates, potassium or ammonium, I prefer potassium, but they're interchangeable. You just might have to dilute them and break them down a little bit with a different solvent. I use acetone. So let's talk about how this works. When you apply dichromates to dry gelatin, you are in essence sensitizing the paper. So let's keep in mind, let's use paper as an example in this scenario. I use Hahnemühle, Arches, Plantino, or whatever it's called, the 300 gram stuff. There's all kinds of paper you can use for this. I like the Hahnemühle. I like the Arches stuff, and I love glass. Any of those substrates work well. But what you do is you take your substrate, let's say paper in this case, you mark it out, put your size of your plate you're going to do and mark it out. That'll just give you spaces for the strips to lay down, to pour your liquid warm gelatin on, to let it set up, cut the strips away, let that dry down. Now your gelatin is dried on the paper. What we now do is take a dilute mixture of dichromate and acetone, and we brush it on to the gelatin. Turns bright orange. Dichromates are very sensitive to light, especially when they're dried. So you want to work in low light with the salts if you can when you're doing this. So you brush the dichromate. I use it 10% and I dilute it about half with acetone, and I brush it on. Then I get it covered really nicely. Then I hang it in the dark to dry. Once that gelatin is dry, the dichromates are completely dry, the acetone goes away quick, you are ready to lay your negative on and expose it to the light. So this is what happens. You take your negative, lay it on the dichromated paper or glass that's dried, expose it just like a regular pot print, and then you pull it out, you put it in the water to wash the dichromates out. You can read about those details, you know, I'm not going to go into them here, but you wash the dichromates out. So now all you have left is gelatin with a relief on it. The high parts where the highlights are, where the silver covered, where the light couldn't hit it, swell up with water. The shadow or void areas where the light could hit it and go through the glass and hit it, harden, and they don't swell. So you have this relief. It's called a relief. I'll show you one here in a second. That relief allows you to roll or brush, spot brush ink onto that while it's swollen. The highlights repel that lithographic ink or that oil. Think of oil and water. That repels the ink. It won't accept it. The shadow areas accept it and turn black to a varying degree, right? Depending on how swollen they are or how much resistance there is there. Also depends on technique as well, too. So what you have are the highlights swollen, you ink them, it repels the ink, the shadows and the midtones, take ink down all the way to the black or brown, whatever color of ink you're using. Then the print dries down, the highlights are white, and then you have a range of tones all the way down to your void or shadow areas. Works really well. Inking is a whole nother kind of topic we could talk about, and how you ink the prints and how well you do it, but that's the idea. That's all there is to it. I mean, I know it doesn't sound that complicated, but it kind of is as you get going. What's so unique about the oil print is it gives that pictorialist look. And if you don't know what the pictorialist movement, you know, Peach, Robinson Peach, there's a whole bunch of 19th, 20th century pictorialists. You should look at that movement. It gives that look and feel, very, very unique kind of almost graphic, almost, you know, haunting kind of look and feel. I just absolutely love it. Another beautiful thing is you can use a variety of ink colors. You can swell and re-ink these with a variety of different colors. You can let it dry, let the ink dry, swell the print again, and add a different color to it or enhance that color, whatever you want to do. There's a lot of ways you can work with these images. These are all from my Ghost Dance. A lot of you have seen these prints before, but these are all oil prints. Here's an image with the relief still. This is a drying print. I've inked it. It's that print right there. I've inked it and I turned it to the side. I caught the light just right. You can see the relief there, right? Look at the bark of the tree where the highlights are and the shadows. The highlights are swollen. They don't accept, and the shadows take the ink. It's a very interesting process. You get a variety of look and feel from, depending what color, how you handle it. I mean, it's just endless what you can do with this process. It's just amazing. And here's one on glass mounted up. This is the back side of it we're looking at. So I framed it, or I put it in a 12 by 12 matte board actually, and taped it on. Little different look. Portrait. That's all. That's Zach. I hope he's watching. I decided to use your print in here, Zach. Half plate, big old weird rock. So you get this different look and feel from them. And if you haven't seen this, this is right after I've washed most of the dichromate out and I'm inking it. So this print is swollen. This is only a minute long. A lot of you have seen this, but for those of you that haven't, watch the ink reveal the image. As I use a roller first, and then I go to my step wedge brush here. So roll the ink on. I'm using a dark brown color, and then sometimes I'll go over it with graphic ink as well. So, or a graphic black, 17, I think it's 1783 or something. I can't remember the numbers. But here you can really see it coming in. So all the white there is resisting, and it's easy to pull the ink off. That's what I'm doing, is spotting it now, taking the ink off. Obviously, I don't work this fast. This is sped up. But there it is. Look at that relief shot. That's a good one. So there it is, freshly inked. Really, really beautiful process, completely archival. And if you have a good, strong negative, there's really nothing that beats this process, so to speak. So let's go to the next one here. So let's go back to Michel's. Here's a Hahnemuhl's paper. So he's squared this off. This is dried. You see how thick the ink is in the center of the paper, where he's allowed the gelatin to dry. This all looks good, but this is a puddle, and also it's cracked, and that's what it will do if you get it too thick, right? It'll crack, and especially if you don't use a plasticizer in it, so to speak. So why is it puddled and cracked? Michelle, this is the answer to your question. And I didn't ask you this in the email because I was going to address this, and you can let me know. But this happens 99% of the time. This happens because you don't wet the paper before you pour it. You need to let that paper sit in tepid or kind of lukewarm water for at least 5 minutes. Let it absorb. Let those fibers swell up and release and relax. Because when you pour the warm gelatin on that paper, you're going to ripple that. That paper is going to flex up and turn this dry part and the wet part. That's what happens. So if you don't wet the paper thoroughly before you pour the gelatin on, you'll get puddles, you'll get unevenness, and you will eventually crack. Here's another shot of a different paper. Very common. And I can see this. Not that the paper is turned up, because gelatin dries and it'll curl your paper, but I can tell this probably wasn't wet when he poured it, or wet enough. So Michelle, remember that. Wet that Hahnemuhl down. Let it sit in the tray of water for 5 minutes before you pour it. Lightly squeegee it off, put it onto your tray, metal tray or table, square it off and pour your gelatin, and I guarantee you, you won't have that problem anymore. So I know that was quick, but I wanted to go over that and make sure everybody kind of got the idea there of what was going on. What is the normal exposure for time for a carbon tissue to start with? You know, Jan, that is a good question, but that's like asking what is a normal exposure for an ambrotype, right? What is your environment? What lens are you using? How did you make your glop, or I call it black jello? How did you make that? There are as many questions there to ask as there are to answer, basically, because at the end of the day, it's just like everything else. It's your exposure. You know, I'll give you an example. My exposures, and if Tim Fry was in here, he could give you a little bit on what he does with his carbons, but my exposures for oil print are between 8 and 15, 12 minutes on the RioNet, on my UV screen printer, right? So exposure with the negative on the paper in the RioNet, I would guess between 10 and 12 minutes, right? But how did you mix your glop? What's your dichromate ratio? Same with oil prints. Or, you know, carbon print, you can adjust those dichromate levels and adjust the contrast. So if you have flat prints, there's all kinds of problems with carbon printing that you're going to run into, but it just depends if you have a good strong negative, how your dichromates are mixed. I'm going to guess 8 to 10 minutes in a Ryonet for the average exposure time for a carbon print, but you might do it in 3 or 4. It just depends. Yes, Doug asks, Quinn, does the amount of dichromate affect contrast? Yes, it absolutely does. And it's counterintuitive, Doug. You would think more dichromates would give you more contrast, but in reality, it's less. So if you want to increase the contrast in your carbon prints, specifically, I think we're still talking about carbon prints, you would lower the dichromate level to raise the contrast in your print. It's kind of counterintuitive, I know, but that's the way it works. I got, Tom says, let's pull Tom's comment up. I got my gelatin on glass plates yesterday. Had a bit of trouble keeping the gelatin from migrating under the mag strip, so I need a better perimeter wall. Oh, that's a great comment. I'm going to turn it into a question. I know you didn't ask a question, but I'll turn it into one. How is your setup? How do you use these magnetic strips, right? How are these strips laid out on paper or glass? I have a table that I covered with steel sheets, and then I get the 1.5 mil, the thicker, more stronger magnets, 1 inch thick, 1 inch wide, and about 2 mils thick. The stronger the magnet you have, the better off you're going to be. Because if you're going through glass, you're not going to have that magnetism to the steel underneath unless you have a really strong magnet. There's a little bit of a trick with the glass. You need a better magnet, thicker wall there, like you said. Paper, you can lay right down. The strips will lay down really easy. It'll magnetize quickly. So good. I'd love to see your oil glass plates. I've said this a million times, but that's the next project I'm doing, is a whole project on Rollins oil prints on glass. This I want to do up here. Absolutely, Jan. Yeah, start with that. Yes, Pablo asked, what if some sugar is added to plasticize the gelatin? You are absolutely correct. That's what the 25 grams of sugar is for, or whatever you use. That is to keep the gelatin from cracking and breaking. You can also add some thiamol for preservatives. You know, it's a kind of living stuff. If you don't freeze it or keep it in the fridge, it'll grow mold and it's bacteria. It'll especially in warm weather. So at the end of the day, you are looking at keeping the dichromate ratio, the exposure of the negative, all the processes to your own environment, right? Because if you think wet collodion is dependent on your geography and your environment and all those personal things, this really is. You're going to have once you get it down, though, I tell people, please try this process. If you like the traditional salt and albumin prints that we see tons of, try this. You will just absolutely fall in love with it, especially if you're doing more kind of poetic, kind of more, I'm a frustrated painter, so I love that kind of look. I love the pictorialist look, I do. And if you've got the right topic, the right subject, it can work really, really well for making work with this process. Oh, Tim chimed in. I'm glad you're here, Tim, because my exposure times for carbon printing using strong UV, 12 to 45 seconds for your prints. Wow, you'd have to chime in and explain that. I have never had under a minute for Tim. Are you talking about a negative on glop? Are you talking about that exposure? Or are you talking about the negative you're making in your camera? Only seconds. Must be strong white or use more dichromate. Wow. Yeah, well, yeah, he'd have to chime in and say, I never get those times. My average printing time, like I said, is between 8 and 15 minutes, depending on the negative on my Ryonet. And Ryonets, guys, are screen printing, high UV screen printing boxes, basically. They're the UV boxes, but they're basically, wow, tissue exposure. Well, good for you. Good for you. Yeah, that's fast. So disregard my carbon exposure times. Yeah, I haven't had that experience. 12 to 45 seconds, insane. Never heard those kinds of exposure times. So good. Anyway, good to know. And again, this is going to vary on each individual, from the negative to how you make your glop, like I said, to how, all that. I know people are very interested in carbon printing. My personal take on carbon printing is it's beautiful. It really is. But it's so close to the traditional kind of silver gelatin print, platinum palladium, even albumin, even some salt. Not salt can get a little, salt gets a little interesting because the substrate you can use, it's a little more pictorialist. But any of those hard substrates or those hard carriers like egg or silver gelatin in this, well, silver gelatin in egg, but silver in egg, but the carbon prints are more traditional looking to me, and I like the oil pictorialist look personally. And brome oil is different. Brome oil starts out with a silver gelatin print and gets your you get your pictorialism on after the print is made, rather than the oil print is made directly on the paper. So different. You can look up brome oils. Yeah, negative density, dichromate amount of ink. I'll use influence this. Yes, it's a same thing. It's the same kind of style thing. Stronger magnetic strips, Tom asked. That's a great question. I've ended up using, I think I got them off Amazon. Look for those 2 mil thick, inch wide strip. They come in rolls. I think I bought 20 feet of them. 20 feet of it, and it works very, very well, actually. So look on there. I don't have any problem even going through glass. But now I've got Jason Lane's 1.3 mil whole plate glass, which you can gelatinize really easy. It's half the thickness of the window pane glass that you get at Home Depot or the big box stores here in America. The thinner the glass, the more magnetism you'll have on your strips. So, hello, Amit from India. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Good to see everybody in here. So let's, where is Hank? Is Hank in here somewhere? I told him to show up. If we don't have him here, I don't think, we can look at his photographs and you guys can give some feedback for him, but I don't see him in here. No, I don't see him anywhere. Let's go ahead and look at this. Is Hank Peters from the Netherlands. I just got his email this morning, so I asked him to be in here. But let's go through these. He can watch this, and you guys can give him some feedback. I know it's difficult if the person isn't here to talk about their work, but we can act like we'll thumb through these. There's only 3 of them, so. Let's give him some feedback as we look at these on what's the first thing. If we look at, we'll start again here. If we look at the photographs, what's the first thing you notice about the images? Anybody want to chime in on this and give him some little bit of feedback there? When I first saw these, I immediately saw the exposure. The exposure. They're probably between a stop, well, let's say 3/4 of a stop and a stop and a half overexposed. Now, a lot of people like these bright ambrotypes, and these are all ambrotypes, I believe. I think that's what he said, ambrotypes and tintypes. Yeah, Jeffrey says clean plates. Definitely clean plates for sure. Clean plates, and it looks like to me he's using CFL light, and I wish he was here so we could ask him. But so this image of this man has a white construction hat on. It looks like he's in some kind of lab coat or something, or I don't know if it's like a occupational portrait. I'm not really sure. He didn't give me any information on it. But what really caught me was It's a nice photograph, right? It's well composed, all that kind of stuff. But it's slightly overexposed, and the background looks like kind of like a stage curtain or something. So it's an interesting kind of combination between. I'm trying to read into this, right? Here we go again about talking about things. I'm just projecting, kind of describing what I see. But it's an interesting kind of combination of this occupational portrait and this kind of stage background of some kind. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Any comments on that? If not, it's okay. I don't. It's kind of hard to talk about these. Here, I like this better, but again, overexposed. Hank, turn that down a little bit. Looks like you've got two lights coming in here. I see in her eyes. Let me see if I can I blow that up a little bit? I don't think I can blow it up anymore. Let me look at something here. Hold on just a second. I'm going to go over here. I might be able to blow this up. Let's look at his light source. Since he isn't here to talk about it, we can usually tell by just looking in the eyes. And we can here. Let me pull this one up. This way. Oh, he might have more than two lights here. I know he's got at least two. Let's look at this, guys. This is this photograph, and I'm going to say stop sharing for just a second. I'm going to come over here and say share this one. So let's look in her eyes and see what kind of light he's using here. So here you can see at least two lights. At least I can. At least two lights there. So this is what I always recommend people doing. Hank, if you're listening or you watch this or hear this, try this for me, or for you. Take that one light, just kind of how I'm lit up right now. I got the sunlight coming through the window here, and I got the shadow side over here. Fill this shadow side with a bounce card or something big, white, silver, something. Rather than lighting all of that up, like her entire face is lit up, right? Let some shadow form. Allow some sculptural shadow to form. I know we have a tendency to fill these things up and light them to the maximum, but if you try that, you might find that, I'm going to go back here to this other one. You might find that you'll have much richer, you'll have better tones, richer, more dimensionalized image. Let's go to this first guy here and see too. Oh, here's even better. Here's even better. Can you guys see that? Let's see if you can see that. Nope. Okay, stop sharing. I got to stop sharing on these to even get a new one up. Let's look at the first gentleman here. Here we go.
Looking on his Facebook,
so you can see clearly in his eyes. There's two light sources. Although I will say this is more of a shadow side. This is a lot nicer here, right, than having that complete blown out white side. Anyway, so those are kind of my feedback on that. Do I have? No. I lost my little slide thing here. Hold on a second. Preoccupied a bit. Here we go. Okay, back to his images, and then the last one here. Not really sure what this is. It looks like some kind of, I would guess, an African artifact of some kind, maybe. Not really sure what it is. The same background. I think this background works better with this image, but again, depending on what you're doing with it. Hank, we're not really sure. So we're just out here kind of guessing, and I really don't like to talk about photographs unless people are here, unless they've kind of given me the go-ahead to talk about them. But what do you guys think? Do you have anything to say about these? Let me see over here in the chat. Yeah, difficult with white helmet. You're right. I mean, you're talking about 4 stops difference between the white helmet and the darkest part of the image at least. So definitely a difficult thing. Oh, looks like he's using strobes based on some pictures. Oh, he could be. He could be. I generally, Jason, and you could be right. You probably are. I haven't looked at his Facebook page, but generally speaking, when you use the Russian collodion community kind of started doing this years ago. When there are 48 degrees up there somewhere where there's not much light. So they started using strobes a long time ago for wet collodion. And they also used modern lenses. So you had this really strange effect on tonal range on the skin. Those look more like CFL lights to me. We'll find out. We'll find out. Maybe he uses both. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the modern lens and the strobe gives a very different skin tone and look to the image. And then CFL, and especially now back in the day, you'd overexpose, especially for ladies, especially older ladies, if they didn't want to see all that detail, they'd overexpose a little bit, and I get that. Or they'd go in and they'd touch up the negative with a lead pencil and do all that fancy 19th century Photoshop stuff, and so I get that. But at the end of the day, the tonal range is being lost in the process if you overexpose even a little bit with this. So Will says, I like the background in the artifact image better. It feels more balanced to me. I agree. I think this, basically because you have the lines, you have the little, I don't even know what we're looking at, but whatever that artifact is with the way it's constructed, it just feels better. And the first one, the second one, I don't have a problem with at all either, really, because he's so close now that the depth of field is dropped out, so you don't get any detail in the background, which makes it easier. But here we have that stage background and this kind of occupational portrait, or again, I don't know what it is. I'm just assuming, a lab guy, a construction guy, something like that. But the background is a little different. My biggest thing is try to reduce that exposure a little bit, Hank. Try that and see what you find, because at the end of the day, that you're not quite exposing, or you're not quite exploiting the tonal range that you could have in some of these. And Jan's right. When you talk about the white helmet versus the shadow areas down here, those are 4 stops apart. So if you expose for this, you're going to get none of this. This is much better to me exposure-wise than this full light. This light is coming in too oblique or too direct on this side, and this is really hot here. So just soften that down a little bit. I think it'd help you tremendously. But anyway, that's what I have. That's what it is. Anything else on Hank's? Any questions, comments? I already cut you off there. We'll hang around for a minute. Thanks. See you next week. It's difficult. Ketterman. Karsten says, let's check this out. Karsten says, the first one is a self-portrait from Hank. Oh, good. You know Hank then. Good. He uses laser focusing for this. Laser focusing. What do you mean by laser focusing? You mean he focuses, he used the pinpoint like laser on his face to get the focus, and then I'm not really sure what that means. Maybe he'll answer. Maybe we'll find out here. What were you just showing there, Jason? What do you have? Unmute yourself, brother.
That was a picture of his studio.
Oh, your studio? Show us again.
No, that's Hank's studio.
Oh, let's see. Oh, okay. Yep. There you go, Hank. I don't know, Hank. So you guys have to help me out. Yeah. Kirsten said, yeah. Oh, thanks for, let me blow that up. Hold on just a second. Put it back up there for just 1 second, Jason. Solo layout. Yeah. Sure enough, he's got a softbox there, an octagon, and I don't know what he's lighting up the back with right there, but yeah, he's using strobes. And Karsten says something about the laser focus. So interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I don't know, Hank. I don't know really anything. A lot of folks come in and yeah, they're doing it, and there's so many people out there doing it. Laser focusing from the side. Oh, from the side. Okay. Anyway, laser focusing, anyone? I'm not sure, but it sounds like some kind of experimental image. And that's Hank himself, I guess. That's what they're saying. So he's not a 3M chemist working on a construction project. Laser from the side. See the red light on your nose. Oh, okay. All right. I'm new to me. I'm not sure what to make of that, but good for him. You're working alone. You're in the COVID cave. Go for it. Laser on the side of the nose. Boom. We know it's focused. And man, we zoomed in on that. His eyes were tack sharp. So good for him. He's got that down. So if you ever need that, get a hold of Hank Peters in the Netherlands. I do know that much about him. So awesome. Hey, do we have any questions out there? Just anything random, general, want to talk about the weather, whatever? Anything? Holler. Unmute yourself and give me a thumbs up. Let me see what crisis I have going on here. Oh, Pablo. There's my amigo right there. So Pablo's in Argentina, right? So some countries we have a time getting these books to, not the, Israel, Argentina, no, those go, no problem. But obscure countries like Iran, I've sent to Iran, I've sent to a few Middle Eastern countries, kind of obscure. But man, sometimes they take weeks to get there. And Jan knows this. Jan ordered a book in the middle of this COVID thing, and I think he waited 3 months for his book. He sent me a sketch. I'm not sure if I may share it here. Not sure. You can share it if you want on my side. That's great. I don't know about Hank's side if it's proprietary. Sorry. Crisis. So yeah, share it if you can, if you want to. If you can or you want to. Private chat. 5 days to Pablo. Beautiful. Beautiful. So happy that you have that. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. So I hate to cut everybody short, 8 minutes, but I'm going to because I got, this plate spinning. I got like 6 fingers. I'm doing this right now. It'll mellow out. Theoretically, I'm supposed to be finished next week. We'll see. With the weather getting colder, any recommendations for chemical mixture? Oh, there's a good one, Craig. No. I was gonna say so. Usually, I'd say, depending on your location, you might want to adjust a little bit with the alcohol, less alcohol, but it's the hot weather that you need to adjust for. Really, collodion chemistry, kind of normal stuff. You don't want to have a whole normal mixed chemistry for positive images will do great in cold weather. They really will. Oh, Carson sent me a photo. I'll share that. So really, all you're doing is adding more acid to your developer in the summertime, not the winter, and adding maybe a little more alcohol in your collodion in the summer to keep it from drying out. Wintertime, not really. The big thing in the wintertime, not mixing chemistry, but storing them and then using them. Again, the cooler, in this case, to keep them at a decent temperature, not getting them too cold. That's the big catch in the wintertime. And yes, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're entering into the wintertime, and you'll want to kind of pay attention to that. So that's a good question, though. And there's really, the summertime is when you want to adjust, Craig, not so much in the wintertime. There's a couple little things, but mostly just due to keeping them warm. Let me share the screen. Herr Ketterman sent this over. Messenger, Facebook, share. So can I zoom in on this? No, download, forward. You need to switch off all lights in the studio so you can see the red laser. Okay, there it is. Yeah. Does that make sense to you guys? That's a neat little thing there. That's a cool thing. Yes, hot weather, you'll definitely have a more difficult time with the chemistry. Hot weather for acid in your developer, I would probably go, if you had 100 mils of developer, let's say if you had 1,000 mils of developer, I would probably go somewhere in the range of 7 in real hot weather, 7%, 6.5, 65 to 70 mils, twice as much. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So somewhere in there. Sorry, I'm distracted again. So yeah, there's Hank's laser beam setup if you're interested in that. Thanks for sharing that, Kirsten. Herr Kettermann. Stop. Boom. There we go. Okay. Pin 4-watt LED spotlight. Sun silver bath inside the house works great. Tim's in Colorado. He doesn't need that. He's got sun galore here. Come on, Tim. What are you asking for a 54-watt LED spot silvers? You're in Colorado where the sun never stops shining. I could sun silver bath 315 days out of the year here. We have more sun than San Diego, California. Don't let this get out. I don't want everybody moving to Colorado because it's sunny. No, we do. We have a lot of sun. Get yourself a spot meter or a spot sun silver bath inside the house. It works great. Every European north of the 40 needs to do that. When they start talking about boiling silver, or North Americans too, if they start, or North Americans, they start talking about boiling silver bath, tell them boil silver bath. Don't heat it up. Don't do it. Silver fulminate. Doug says, how do you feel about UV meters? You know, Doug, there is a great, there are great tools out there, and you can get very precise and very scientific. UV meters are great. The problem is connecting to what they mean, having some kind of baseline, right? So you have this random number of 3 on a day, and it produces images with this particular lens and this particular chemistry at this exposure. Number 3 gives me 2-second exposures. UV meter number 9 gives me 1-second exposures, et cetera, et cetera. They're great. I recommend, really personally, because there's so many variables in this, I recommend taking notes on the time of year. You know, we're rotating and tilting, right? And so we do this all year long, so the sun changes. I've got my EcoFlow over here, and I've got 4 solar panels, and I had them on the roof here. And come about October, and my EcoFlow would stay charged 100% in here. Come October, though, the sun cuts so low now, my EcoFlow won't charge. So now I have to move my solar panel somewhere. So as we tilt and turn and change, that light changes drastically. The quality of light, all of that stuff. A UV meter will help you, especially, you know, if you're not familiar with the environment you're shooting in. At least it'll give you some base idea. I even say that with light meters, period, just photo light meters, like the good old, you know, ISO 3, and you get your exposure on there and you guesstimate. I've also recommended in the past Pinhole Photo, the app. A gentleman in France made that. He came to a workshop, and he said, what would you do if you had to change this app? I said, go down to ISO point, you know, it's the lowest ISO you can imagine, and change that app, and that'll give you some good idea. But again, not UV. So what we're talking about is north actinic light, or strong UV light for this process. You can really get a good handle, either experience or the right tools, and then take copious notes. This was November 22nd at 10 a.m. in this location. this lens and this chemistry, this is the exposure I got, that kind of thing. That will help you, definitely. And I think over time, especially if you stay in one place and you learn how the seasons change and the light works and all that stuff, the time of day, this gets really crazy when we're dependent on natural light. That's why a lot of people just like to set up studio strobes or CFLs and go for it. Really good experiences to make a plate. Just aside from whatever you're doing, make 3 or 4 plates a month, maybe once a week in each month, and take notes on it. January through December, take notes in the time, try different times a day, and watch how radically your images change. This is the biggest thing people don't understand. This is why it's so traumatic for people to leave the studio and go out into natural light. It's a whole different ball game. It's a lot more difficult. It's challenging. You're chasing the light. You don't know the UV, like Doug's saying. So it would help. I mean, it would definitely help. I would say this though, Doug, again, and you know this because we've worked a lot together. I am not a big fan of adding another component or another piece of equipment to the process. I'd rather have somebody tell me, hey, I can take this one away and you can still do a great job. So I'm a big advocate of finding ways to do the job more efficiently with less equipment versus man, I've seen videos where people say, get this vacuum pressure pump and this and that to do your, this and that and your varnish. And man, by the time you think my studio is full, I can't imagine what these people's look like, because they're like buying a piece of equipment to do everything. I mean, if you want to do that, that's great. I have enough equipment. I have enough stuff going on. People walk into my place for a workshop and they say, oh my God, what is all this stuff? Do I need all this? They freak out. No, you don't. Oh, tissue exposure for your tissue. Yes, try that, Doug. That's a great idea. People love carbon printing. They really do. And I get it. I get it. My heart, my mind, my love right now is in oil printing. So I just love the oil prints. So, all right, guys, I think I'm going to call it good. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for buying my book, brother. Spending your hour with me on a Saturday. I know it's hectic. I know it's crazy. We'll get back to normal here in a week or two. And maybe I'll be doing a broadcast from my house in a couple of weeks. Let's see. I hope so. But if not, we'll stay here. So have a great weekend. Stay safe. Stay healthy. We'll see you next Saturday. Thank you. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.